If you've seen this channel before, you will know that I love drawing on cardboard. I've made videos about it before. I love doing it. I think it's great fun and it's good practice. Well, today I've got this packaging for yogurts. I've drawn on lots of these before, and today I'm going to do a doodle on one of these. So, alright, let's get started. So for this piece I used my favourite piece of cardboard canvas that I've used several times before, and I basically took a 1.0 nib of a Pigma Micron fine liners and just randomly started to make marks that almost looked like a crack in concrete or pavement. And I had no plan, as always. I just thought I will see what happens when I start drawing lines. I suppose the only plan that I did have was to have two different nib sizes, and I wasn't sure exactly what they'd be, but definitely this would be the thicker of the two. I should probably try something a bit more dramatic than a 1.0, which is what I'm drawing with now. I think if I were to use something which is really quite large, like a marker, I could get the benefit of a real distinct variation between the line quality. What I like to do with this is to try and draw a couple of lines alongside each other. Once I make a decision like that, it becomes a bit of a theme and I stick to it. So initially it wasn't the plan, but once it started to look good and work, I just couldn't change direction on how I was approaching the drawing. That's how I end up with something quite thematic. I think in the future I should really try to push the drawing quality in several different directions and unify it at the end. At the moment what happens is I find something which I think is a quality that I could make consistent, and then I just continue with that as much as I can, which is what you see me doing now. And the lines I tried to make quite angular, even though the first couple of lines had curves to them. These are not exactly square, but they are definitely angled and almost straight, and that was something I was trying to maintain. But I quite liked the idea that it almost looked like city planning or something, you know, like I was marking out spaces for properties, car parks, and that wasn't something that I was seeing at the time, but I was quite aware of the relation between the lines and the black marks that I was colouring in, or filling in I should say. It's not really colouring, is it? But that's what I was noticing and enjoying at that point, was how much of the space I could cover by stretching these marks across and pushing them in different angles and directions. I was trying to not make too many S shapes or shapes which looked like letters. I felt as though the angles would be more beneficial if they curved and turned in directions which weren't. You see with that one there, it kind of curved back against itself again instead of curving away, which would have made an S or a Z. That's what I was trying to do, is to try and avoid anything which looked as though it could be identified as any kind of alphabet. I think more because it would affect me more than anyone looking at the piece afterwards. It would affect the way that I draw the piece. I sometimes just can't control what happens in my mind as far as pattern recognition and decision making. I'm very easily influenced by a decision that I've made, and that's what dictates the remainder of the piece, and that's what happened here. I say piece, it's more of a doodle this really, but there we are. That's what I'm doing. So I'm just trying to see how many of these different marks and angles I can fit into the space until I have something which becomes this mass instead of it being quite as spacious as it is. So I kept trying to find different options and thinking about what is going to happen if I continue this. Will I ruin it, or will it become better, or will I see something new, and what's the next step going to be afterwards? And doing the lines parallel to each other was a good direction, in my opinion anyway, because it gave me the option to draw a line in a strange shape and then to divert from that at some point with the parallel line. And that's what I was doing, was trying to utilize the different options that I could find with these alternate pathways. There was lots and lots of different things that I could have done with this, and you start to see more potential at this point, well, or I certainly do. So watching myself draw it now, I look and I think, wow, I could have really changed this significantly from where it goes and where it's going at the moment. It could have been vastly different if I would have just stepped back and seen it. But when I'm in the moment and trying to just get something drawn and make something work, it just turns into whatever the impulse drives it to be at the time. And it's just on a whim a lot of the time. It's just something which I'm trying to figure out on the fly. But it's not something which I regret. It's something which I'm trying to be a bit more reflective on now. And I think that type of introspection where you analyze your own motivation and your own instincts can be quite healthy, because I am hoping to grow and to shape what I have so far into something which is a lot more kind of matured and developed further than what it is at this point, which is just fumbling around trying to discover, which is a fun part. It's not, I'm not trying to belittle the stage that I'm at. I quite enjoy that. I mean, look at that. I think that's quite an enjoyable shape. And then the only thing that I could think to do next was to get the 0.1 nib. Since all my first marks were 1.0 nib, I thought the difference in line weight would be significant, but you can barely tell. I mean, you might be able to see it, but initially I thought it's not so obvious that I'm drawing much thinner lines now. But it does have a difference enough where I quite like this decision as well to introduce these lines. There are a million different things that you can do with these ideas, but to try to do this perspective is challenging to an extent, but it's also not figurative enough to dictate right and wrong decisions in any obvious sense. So I felt a little bit of freedom where I could push lines in certain directions and force them through gaps and spaces and try to communicate ideas without feeling too constrained by any laws of which actually dictate perspective and proportion in real life. So that was quite freeing, and yeah, it was quite an enjoyable point because I already enjoyed the drawing before I introduced this pen. So as soon as I did introduce it, I knew that it wasn't doing any harm. Well, I say I knew, I felt to me it wasn't doing any harm. It was actually adding another layer of complexity and dimension to an already fairly complicated looking pattern. So that's what I created, was this this kind of patchwork of different marks and intersecting lines. I find it quite satisfying. I think it's something which I could do more of in the future, perhaps a little bit looser, and maybe something which is slightly more figurative, or maybe relates to something else which I've made as far as more of organic shapes alongside some of these angular patterns. But that's how it ended up. Okay, so that is the doodle done. Now, I think that's quite nice. It's got some interesting parts to it. Part of me thinks, should I have spread it out to the edges? Other parts of me think, should I have done this on paper? But hey, I quite like how it's worked out anyway. I always enjoy this sort of square format. It's very Instagram, if you will. Yeah, try it yourself. It's a little playful doodle style. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then please leave a like, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, ring that notification bell, share this with any friends and family that you can. I really want the channel to grow, and with your help it will. Thank you very much for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one.